Aloha and welcome to Goddess Unleashed. This is Diane Vick, and on today's episode, I'm interviewing another author from the Crappy to Happy series. And this author is Judy Lemon, and what she does really intrigues me because I have not much information about it or know a lot about it. So I'm excited to interview you today. Judy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm a shamanic practitioner and a trauma therapist from San Diego, California. My lineage is the curanderos of Rio Napo in Peru, and I have been working with my shamanic medicine path for about 15 years. My whole shamanic experience has been much longer than that. And I combine different modalities for a whole channeled session for my clients.
Beautiful. And you were born here in the United States, so you traveled to Peru to learn this?
Yes. Yeah, it's quite a long, convoluted story. And I've actually written an entire book about how I got into that apprenticeship. The book is called Machete Woman, Tales of Resilience and Rebirth. And the book is complete, but it needs to be edited and kind of changed a little bit. I am definitely working with an editor, and she's made some very good comments about how we can shift the focus of the book. But it basically tells the story of how I went from being an aspiring rock star in London to a Peruvian shaman's apprentice living in the jungle.
Wow, that's a big shift. That is pretty incredible. Well, let's jump back into your story. So your story on the Crappy to Happy series is called The Magic Tree. And I know all of these stories have some kind of an obstacle or challenge that came in the way and how the storyteller has evolved. Can you tell us about your challenge?
The magic tree in my story is a Ranako tree, which in the Peruvian jungle, it's a tree that has many roots. And this particular area of my teacher's camp was very sacred. And what he wanted me to do as part of my training was to do a medicine ceremony out in the jungle at night by myself. And you know, when you grow up in a place, you know, wild place, you get used to it. You don't think anything about going out in the jungle at night, you know how to protect yourself. Well, me as a white woman training down there, the idea of sitting out in the jungle alone, especially under the influence of a visionary medicine, gave me pause. Because I thought like, well, what if I want to say like the Yana Puma, the black cougar comes out of the jungle. What if there's a giant anaconda that wants to eat me? You know, you think, what if it starts raining? You know, the mind starts going through all the different fear things. But basically, the story of the magic tree is me trying to make a deal with my teacher to accommodate me as a Westerner initially, like, oh, is it okay if I use like a mosquito net? You know, and of course he's rolling his eyes at me. And then eventually, basically once I saw what he and his helper did for me in preparing this ground, I thought, I can't be a Westerner. I must be in their place. I have to do what they did, what is part of our lineage for thousands of years. So it was me facing my fears about sitting out in the dark alone under the influence of hallucinogenic tea. And I obviously made it because I'm back here to tell my story.
Right. Yeah, you have to sometimes to get to our goals, we gotta work through a lot of fears. So I'm sure there were a lot of fears you were working through that day.
Yes. Yes. I think probably the biggest one once I went down the list was being eaten alive by the mosquitoes. You know, I'm very sensitive to bites. So once I just decided no mosquito net, I just put on seven layers of clothes and a rain poncho. And then I have a leaf rattle that I use, and I kept the leaf rattle going while I sang because, you know, I do a lot of singing. And I ate a few mosquitoes, but on the other hand, I didn't get one bite. I thought,
That's nice. I like to sing a lot and dance. That's some of the stuff that I use in when I'm coaching my clients. Is it's a great stress reliever. It brings a lot of joy into life. So I like to hear when other people sing because I think it's so awesome.
Oh yeah. I'm a trained singer. My greatest love was always to be a rock star. So I have been in bands for many years, and I actually moved from San Diego to London in the early 80s, and I ended up getting married and staying there for nearly 20 years. The music thing never quite had the success that I would have liked. But now, you know, in a lot of my work, I sing sacred songs in different languages. So I still get to play a lot of instruments and I still get to sing, which makes me happy. So like you, I use the music for healing rather than parading around on another kind of stage.
And I think it's so much better because you're tapping into something unique that you can help people with. So it's amazing.
Yes, yes.
Now tell us about what I really want to know about. What is being a shamanic practitioner? What does that mean?
The word, those of us who do this work, we tend to call ourselves shamanic practitioners rather than shamans. It's more of a respect thing for the native peoples who are called by those titles. The word shaman comes out of the Tunguska region in Siberia, but it's now made its way around the world. So a shaman is somebody who is able to fly out of what we call ordinary reality in the way that we're speaking now to consult with a group of spirit helpers about somebody's illness or the case that we need to consult with them about. It's not, we open up to be a conduit. We don't consider that we're the ones doing the work. So in order to be successful and effective, we have to spend many years as an apprentice doing work on ourselves so that we are able to open up ourselves as a conduit. And then as we go along, we acquire all these different spirit helpers. I have certain ones who sing through me. I have ones who do the healing work. There are other ones who are more of counselors. So you don't just have one, you have several ones. Like if I need to do what they call it psychopomp, like lead a soul, a person who's died to help their soul cross over, there's somebody who helps me with that. If I need to communicate with somebody on the other side, I may have another one that helps me with that. So since I'm a second generation practitioner, you know, I would certainly call my teachers shamans, although in my lineage, we call ourselves vegetalistas. We are people who work with plants. Spanish could be curanderos or curandera, like healers. So, you know, it's easier in the Western world to just refer to myself as a shamanic practitioner. I practice shamanism.
Interesting. And you also practice somatic trauma therapy, right?
Somatic experiencing. It's a trauma therapy developed by Dr. Peter Levine. And a lot of the clients that I have been seeing over the years have been particularly, I would say probably a good 90% of my clients are women who have suffered sexual abuse at the hands of a family member. So I found somatic experiencing in a very shamanic way. I was deep in the Brazilian jungle working with a group, and I got directed to look at this book that was on a shelf underneath the ceiling. And it was the only book in English. And it was Waking the Tiger, which was Peter Levine's first book about how he developed somatic experiencing. And the message I got was, read this book. And then as I read it, I went, oh my goodness, I need to learn this. So I waited for a cohort to come to San Diego, and I did the training and I graduated. I became an SEP, somatic experiencing practitioner. And I've since found that this technique can be quite shamanic, because when I'm sitting with a client, I'm very tapped into watching and feeling what they're feeling, because sometimes when they start triggering or releasing some of the energetics, it's very subtle. It's almost like you almost can't see it with your physical eyes. You have to use your spirit eyes. But over time, over the years since I got the SCP qualification, I've realized this is a great thing to combine. So my method is somatic spiritual healing. So when a client comes in, I will start reading them energetically and then open up to see what they have to say. And we might start with some trauma release, get rid of that energy first, and then we might bring in the shamanic work or go back and forth. It basically dictates whatever the person needs on that day.
It makes sense. I had never really heard of either one, but as an empath, I get those messages. So when I'm doing hypnosis on clients, or I'm even doing a consultation, I can sense that there's something deeper that needs to be evaluated. And
Yeah.
depending on the person, I take it very slowly. So
Yeah.
some people, I do regressions as well. Some people might want to start with regressions from the beginning because they know there's something back there, then they want to know more. Some people, I just start with hypnosis and begin to open up their minds to visualization. And then when they're ready, we move on to go a little bit deeper and figure out what happened in their past. So I think it's beautiful that there's so many different strategies for people to find their path and understand their trauma and how can they release it from their bodies.
That's right, because, everybody has their own different thing that makes them feel comfortable. I'm sure you've probably found too that somebody who wants healing has got to feel safe. We have to create a safe space for them, because lots of times when they start opening up, they're in a very vulnerable place. And one of the premises of somatic experiencing is called titration and pendulation. So titration, as in chemistry, we're not going to open up the valve and like somebody comes in, I'm not going to say, tell me what happened to you the night that you were attacked, because they're going to flip right back into their trauma vortex. We skirt around the edges of it. While I'm watching the body, watching the energetics, they might start releasing something, and it's all according to their comfort level. So in the pendulation part is, we'll go a little bit into the trauma and then we pull back. We go into the vortex and the counter vortex, so they don't get hit with this big thing and get re-traumatized.
Oh, that absolutely makes sense. It's like my section of the story. It talks about peeling away the onion. So when you have a trauma, you go little by little. You peel the onion. You find self-limiting beliefs. You find emotions. You work on those, and little by little, you will get deeper into the root of the problem to really heal and transform. So
yes.
It's amazing how they align, even though they're so different, our practices.
The more I study different practices, I realize in the end, the result is the same. It's healing, ideally physical, but the emotional bodies. It's healing the different energetic bodies. And there's just, it's kind of like with religions, there's different belief systems, but in the end, perhaps we might consider, if you believe in a God, he just has many different names.
Yeah, it makes sense. So my biggest fear, which is what I've been working on for the past 8 years, is the fear of being seen and the fear of being heard. And for me, that was like the biggest obstacle. And I still work on that now because I'm peeling away the onion. I'm getting more comfortable with being on live videos and all this. What have you found in your practice was the common fear that people are working through?
Let me see. I think in terms of the ones who come to me, because in addition to being a healer, I'm also a teacher. I get a lot of people who come to me, I want to learn how to meet my spirit guides. I want to learn how to move energy and that kind of a thing. I think probably the biggest fear would be dealing with spirits, because that's a whole minefield. they're in a whole subject that I could go on about for hours, because there's different levels. There's ones that, I don't want to use the term evil spirits, but let's just say they have their own agendas and they can cause problems. Like, for example, if people decide they're going to get a Ouija board and play around with a Ouija board, in my experience, you might be bringing in something that you are not prepared to deal with. So when people are talking about like, well, I want to get my own spirit crew, or I want to get my own spirit guide, but I'm afraid, what if it's not a good spirit? So, I will work with them in teaching them how to open up to a guide, what the guide feels like in their body, what the messages are like, how to protect themselves. When we're working in multidimensional realms, it's very important to have strong psychic protection. It's not this, hey, let's take this substance and go walking out there in another world. There may be something out there waiting for you that you're not quite ready to meet yet.
Yes, I get it, and that's something you definitely have to be careful with when you're working with people. You don't want to make it even more uncomfortable for them. You want them to have a good experience.
And learn. Well, it's kind of like learning to drive. You're not going to go start driver's training and sit in a Ferrari and like start taking that down the street. It's little by little. You learn to build up your toolbox so that when you get to the point like where I am, I can deal with just about anything, but it's taken me many years to get here. It's little by little, step by step.
Absolutely. It's always a building block. We're evolving little by little, and that's why it takes its time, because we grow every single day as we learn and experience new things. Now, there's a phrase that came up when I was reading the catchphrases of your book. Tell us your perspective about women living in the jungle with men.
Well, I actually had a good time. Having grown up in the sex and drugs and rock and roll of the 70s, and having been a professional musician for many years, let's just say I'm not exactly a shy person. The jungle people, I'll speak even just like the Peruvian Amazon jungle people, are very sexual. They are not prudish. They're very polyamorous. They talk about sex all the time. They love children. So I think they were trying to make me blush, or, maybe push my buttons and see like, oh, let's see, how far we can take her. But it didn't work with me because of my background. When you've been in a band with guys and they're talking about, snagging the groupies or doing all of this kind of stuff, you get used to dealing with this very overt sexual atmosphere, and you learn how to deal with it. So, I remember my first teacher, Javier, we were doing a what we call a minga, and it's when somebody has a task and they can't do it themselves, so they ask the villagers to help, and then they'll provide food and stuff. And I remember I was watching some of the jungle men, and I happen to think they're gorgeous. Their rippling muscles, their jet black hair. And I remember like looking at them, and as we're doing our training, we're not supposed to be thinking about sex. We take sex off the table, anything like that. But the jungle is a very sensuous place. And I remember, just kind of looking at them and just thinking like, gosh, these guys are so gorgeous or whatever. So my teacher, I don't know whether he knew what I was thinking, but he sidles up to me and he goes, "You must be very careful, Judita. These men, they will carry you off in the bushes for sex." And I think he thought that I was going to be like really alarmed or like, oh gosh, no, and worried. But instead I started busting up laughing, because I'm thinking like, they're worried about me. They should be, I shouldn't be worried about them. They should be worried about me, and I just was laughing and laughing. And he got very concerned, and he says, "Well, what's so funny, Judith?" And I said, "Oh, Javier, you just have no idea who your student is, do you?" And I think he kind of like gave me this sideways look, and I'm just a very strong person. And I think because I was able to laugh at myself and give it back to them like, "Whoa," it's like, yeah, I'm sleeping between two men underneath a mosquito net. They loved that. I wasn't shy. I wasn't intimidated. I would laugh with them. I would sit on the ground and eat with my hands with them. So they accepted me as one of them, even though I was this bungling white woman who obviously struggled with certain aspects of the apprenticeship.
That's a great story. That actually brings me to a story here within the United States. So when I started working through my fears of being heard and being seen, I started going to networking events, and I joined this group called BNI Gables Rainmakers, which was pretty much all men. And for me, that was overcoming a big fear to stand up in front of men every single week and speak. And the feedback that I would get from them was a lot of funny jokes, and they really embraced me into the situation, and I felt so comfortable. And finding that we have to work through that uncomfortableness to find the good in situations. So
Yeah,
it's beautiful when we begin to recognize those things in our life.
I think so. And it definitely helps to have a sense of humor. If they're laughing and there's a good thing and you can look at yourself, laugh along with them, because then, the impression is, oh, she's not full of herself. She can be like we are. And then, to lose the defensiveness, it obviously depends on your audience, but, like I said, I've always been in male dominated fields. I used to fly planes when I lived in England, little Cessnas, being in the music business. When I was a teenager, I used to surf. I was interested in motorcycle riding. I've always been interested in these more male dominated things. So if you're going to walk in that world, you have to learn to have a backbone and a sense of humor.
Oh yeah. And the thing that they loved the most was that I would always talk about bringing fireworks and sexy back in the classroom. And now that's what I'm merging into in my program is starting to teach something that I call orgasmic meditation, which is really a deep connection with yourself, taking you into the five senses and the colors. And it has nothing to do with an orgasm at all.
Yeah.
But it will lead you to that in the future. So that's a lot of fun. But it was always amazing to do my little commercials and watch them just go crazy, insane, laughing.
I bet. Yeah.
So we have about a couple minutes left. So how do you want to explain anything else about what you do and your workshops so the audience knows how to reach out to you?
They can find me through my website at judylemon.com, and I have my offerings listed on there. I do all sorts of things. I do spiritual development. I do counseling. I do the trauma therapy. Basically, and right now I'm starting to do mentoring as well. Lots of times people will say, I want to develop my own abilities. So since each person's at a different place, I don't offer it as a group class. So I'm starting to do one-on-one mentoring. Basically, it's like whatever is coming up. So any kind of shamanic healing that could be extractions, soul retrievals, okay, I'll go ahead and say it, depossessions. It's not exactly my favorite thing to do, but somebody's got to do them. Dealing with things that you don't want attached to your body. So there's a lot there. So yeah, they can go to my website and see, and then they can also pick up Crappy to Happy and read The Magic Tree, and eventually when my full-length book comes out, Machete Woman, there'll be quite a lot in that as well.
Well, that's a great thing that they know exactly what you do and how to reach out and find you. Thank you for being on this episode, and make sure everybody that you stay tuned for the second half where I have another shamanic practitioner coming on. And I hope you have a great day. This is Diane Vick. Aloha.